147 straight days of Clippers talk for you. Welcome in. I'm Adam Osland. Good to be with you guys from the Burbank studios here at AM 570 LA Sports. Okay, we got a good show for you today. Harrison Faigen's coming on from SB Nation to help preview the Clippers-Lakers matchup on Friday and on Sunday. Is a back-to-back with a day off in between at Crypto. Final two games against the Lakers this season. Kind of a big deal. So I thought I'd give you guys a good guest to help make this a quality preview show for you in the Battle of Los Angeles. I want to start, though, with this. Kawhi Leonard. You know I'm always doing Kawhi watch on here. Why? Well, is there anything more important than Kawhi getting back to looking like a top 5 player in the league? No, not when you're talking about this team contending in the Western Conference. This is the number one thing. It's all about Kawhi. They can only go as far as he takes them. For him to do that, he has to be at an all-NBA level. That means playing like at least a top 15 player in the game nightly. That's good enough for the regular season. And then hopefully he can take things to another level in the playoffs. But this is it. There's 24 games left in the regular season. Kawhi might play 18, 19 of those, considering I think there's still 5 more back-to-backs. I think it's time. I think with the Lakers coming up this weekend and how meaningful these games are, with the Clippers back in the loss column by 4 games, with the Lakers still being a team they could have a tiebreaker against. They're 1-1 so far, 1-1 in the season series. 2 games left to play, Friday and Sunday. If the Clippers could somehow find a way to win both, they'd have the head-to-head tiebreaker. And depending on what happens with the Lakers versus Minnesota tonight, they could be just 2 games back of them. If they want any hope of chasing down the Lakers, they got to win both games. I know it's a lot to ask, but if they want a chance of passing the Lakers in the standings, that is what is going to be required of the Clippers. That's what it has to be. So these are massive games. The split, cool. That might be able to keep them in the 6th spot. Maybe. But if you want a chance to catch the Lakers in the standings, who have been on an absolute tear and have had the best defense in the league the last 15 games, you have to win both. I don't see a way that happens without Kawhi getting back to looking like him. A top 75 player ever. A guy people fear. One of the greatest two-way players of all time. That's what we're still waiting to see. That version of Kawhi Leonard. Chad, if you can hear me all right, let me know. I think I just adjusted my settings here. This is Clippers Talk. I'm Adam Osland. Harrison Faigen will join us from SB Nation to help preview that Lakers series this weekend. Remember, the Lakers still have a game tonight at Crypto against Ant and the Minnesota Timberwolves. So they will be at a rest disadvantage. But it's not like they're traveling. Although, do we really know if, let's say, Luka and LeBron are both going to play in a back-to-back right now? Is that a sure thing that they will be playing in both games? I see the chat isn't working on my restream, so I have to watch it on delay on the YouTube side over here. I don't know what's wrong with restream or why this happens far too often. Summer saying, as I checked the phone, Deca Fantastic came in here and said first. Six Ab said, hey. Clifford said, dang. Deca Fantastic said, Ben Simmons and Luka have some beef. Tell me about that. Not Eubanks beef stew level, though. Ben Simmons looking very confident in a Clippers jersey, said Brandon Beasley. Very much so. The guy hit a fall-away jumper in last night's game. A mid-range fall-away from Ben Simmons. Deca Fantastic said, couldn't agree more about Kawhi. Toby said Kawhi needs to be the best player on the floor the next 2 games. King Charles said Eubanks did just play his best game as a Clipper. This is true. And I think he only played the first half. But that start to the second quarter, massive. He had a couple of easy looks, got him to go. His defense was good. Played hard. That's all I ask. Be better than Mo Bamba. Ricky Bobby said this is Harden's team in the regular season. Well, I would agree. It has been. I think at some point here, it has to transition back to being Kawhi's team. And I think that time has come. I made a prediction last night that I think Kawhi could be off the minutes restriction this weekend. He's been playing about 32, 33. Can they get him to 36 now? I know a lot of people were frustrated with not seeing him play in the last 3 minutes of the fourth quarter, not seeing him play the entire fourth quarter. He started the fourth quarter. I guess if you brought him in a little bit later, that could have been a remedy. That could have been another way to strategize to have him close out the game last night against Chicago. But I think the Clippers were going for the kill early in the fourth. It didn't really happen. Kawhi did hit a huge three-pointer as the shot clock expired before he was taken out of the game. They led by 5 when he was taken out. They won the game by 5. 122 to 117 last night over Chicago in one they had to have. But I've been wondering about Kawhi, where he's at in this process of the ramp up, because Lob Murray has been kind of doing a checklist. Check-in boxes. Kawhi clears this hurdle, moves on to the next. And so I asked him about that pregame yesterday. Where's Kawhi at now? Because he just had what could have been a setback with, and it was, the left foot injury. So he didn't play the 2 games previously, but he looked okay movement-wise last night. I thought overall he had some bounce. There was one time we brought him into the front court with real pace. The start of the third quarter was good from him. But here was Lob Murray on that question of the state of Kawhi Leonard right now.
Even at 13 points also. Just 2 more for you here, Law, quickly. Where are we at on the Kawhi Leonard checklist in his return? Because of this setback, do some things restart? Are we going to see him play less minutes tonight? Like, how far away are we from seeing him play, where he hits the gas a little bit and gets back to that All-NBA level?
Well, I think that's next month. I think March is a huge month. Obviously, the first game of March will be that second game in downtown Los Angeles. And so I actually I'm not concerned about Kawhi's foot. Like, he suffered an injury in game. He practiced. He missed the back-to-back. He's playing tonight. He didn't even miss a week of games. So I think that him playing consistently is what you want. He obviously hasn't had as great a February, but I think that the bigger key is, can he play really well in March? Like, that is a full month of games that's more or less going to determine whether the Clippers are in the play-in tournament or not. And it's always good when Kawhi is playing. Like, he's going to play his 17th game of the season tonight. You just hope that whatever happens, it comes with a win and with health. And so the checklist remains the same. Came back to practice in December, came back to game action in January. Hey, he's gone through a lot as far as the minutes increase, getting through the foot, getting through the All-Star break, getting out the All-Star break. He's on the floor tonight. March is the month where he has to play at a higher level than he has for this team to remain in the top 6 in the West. It's going to be it's a very interesting group of games, and the best part about it is Kawhi is back, and I would anticipate Norman Powell not reporting here, but no one's expressed any concern about Norm being out long term. So the hope is that he'll be back at some point soon as well.
Well, you have great.
So a little bonus there from Law talking about Norman Powell at the end. But he's saying March is the month for Kawhi getting back to looking like Kawhi or needing to look like Kawhi. Kind of the final step there. First game of March, Sunday against the Lakers. Can they get by if he's still at 32 minutes on Friday night against the Lakers? They could. I think Friday night is a better opportunity for them because the Lakers are on a back-to-back. They take on Minnesota tonight. They could be a little bit gassed. Maybe Luka or LeBron don't play both games of the back-to-back. Maybe one of them misses the game Friday against the Clippers. Probably unlikely, but it's possible. So what I've been wondering with Kawhi, with everybody, not everybody, but some people saying, okay, he's washed, he doesn't look the same. Other people saying, well, it's just the minutes restriction. We've seen him look like Kawhi in spurts here and there. I watch his movement a lot. I try to see how explosive he looks out there. He's looked tentative at times in transition. The good news is he has been much better from 3 as of late. To put things in perspective, we're scrutinizing or overanalyzing a guy who is shooting 46% from the field and 39% from 3 in 17 games so far. But he hasn't scored more than 27 points in the game. The average overall points per game is down because he was on a minutes restriction from 20 minutes to 24 to 28. Now he's at 32. But his three-point shooting has been going up and up as of late. He's 20 for his last 43 from 3. That's 47%. His last 9 games, he's shooting 47% from 3 on 43 attempts. That usually tells you your legs are there. That's usually a really good sign. So why is the field goal percentage down? 3-point percentage looks pretty good. His last 7 games, he's been almost better from 3 than 2. It's his 2-point percentage that's down. He's not hitting a lot of the shots he typically does in the mid-range. So I went to the numbers to look at this. This season, from 5 to 9 feet out, he's at 45%. From 10 to 14 out, he's only at 42%. From 15 to 19 feet, 44%. For comparison's sake, you look at 5 to 9 feet out, 45% this season. Last year, he was at 54%. 9% better. This year, 10 to 14 feet, 42%. Last year, He was almost at 50% there. Almost 8% better from 10 to 14 feet. This year from 15 to 19 feet, 44.4%. Last year, 46.7. Okay. But the majority of his damage is that 10 to 14 feet area. That's mid-range Kawhi. And he's down almost 9% there. And it's not just from last year. You go back the year before. From 10 to 14 feet out in the 22-23 season, the first season off the ACL, Kawhi is shooting 52% there. This season, he's at 42% there. He was at 52% there the 22-23 season. And from 15 to 19 feet out, he was also at 52% there. This season, 44%. This is his bread and butter. This is what he does. He's a mid-range assassin. So what's the problem? It seems to me like they're not getting him the ball to his spots as much right now. Maybe it's intentional. Maybe it's a slow drip process. Maybe it's something going on with other guys eating more now, with Norm, with Zubats, with James Harden. And Kawhi isn't as much of a focal point, and they haven't transitioned back to making him the number one option the majority of the times down, the majority of possessions. I did see some of that to start the third quarter, where the ball was in his hands, I think, to start the first 6 possessions. I want to say he took the first 3 shots. That was good to see. The offense clicked in, running it through Kawhi to start the third quarter last night in Chicago. So I went and looked at his most productive game this season against San Antonio, where he was uber efficient out there. And after that game, where he had 27 points against his former team and looked the closest to last year's version of Kawhi, where he was 11 of 19 for his 27 points, 6 boards, 7 assists, 2 of 4 from the outside. I went and looked at that game. And what I noticed was, and I'll show you the clip here, it seemed like they were more intent on getting him the basketball at his spots, his sweet spots in the mid-range, without him having to create on ball to get there. These were entry passes to Kawhi in the mid-range, not him bringing the ball up, having to get to his spots himself. This is guys throwing him passes, throwing him open to his sweet spots. Like, look at this in the third quarter here. Here's Kawhi. Gets a screen from Ivica Zubats. Gets to the jumper. Just an off-ball screen by Big Zoo. James Harden's looking for him. Left elbow. Fade away. Good elevation. Over Harrison Barnes. Bucket. Easy. Bread and butter. Has that all day. Here comes another screen. Watch Big Zoo. Gets Castle on Kawhi. Screens his man. Wasn't the greatest entry pass. Kawhi's big mitts were able to get it anyways. Kawhi goes from the left elbow to just inside the right. Fall away jumper. Boom. Don't work harder, work smarter. They're already getting him the ball at his spots. They're running these elbow actions for Kawhi. They're intent on doing it. And they're not making him just ISO his way to the mid-range. One more for you. and this isn't even a shot, but it's still Kawhi getting the ball where he wants it. Boom. Free throw line. Kawhi. Quick movement. Mid post now near side. Attacks. Watch the pass. The defense collapses on him. He's got 4 guys surrounding him. Somehow he finds Ivica Zubats here. Even with Wemby. Big Zoo puts in the and one. I don't even think they have done or experimented enough with this so far this season. I don't know if it's intentional that they're just not doing it because they haven't fully unleashed Kawhi yet. They haven't made that commitment to getting back to playing through him all the time. But that's kind of what it looks like to me because it's there. Make the entry passes to the mid post to Kawhi. I saw at least one of them last night, but that was something that they would spam at times. The last couple of years, that is, I mean, it's his entire career, but as a Clipper, that's where you need to get him the ball. So I'm wondering if this is strategy, if this is they don't want to put too much on Kawhi's plate right now. They don't want to overtax him because he's been in the ramp-up process. But I think it's time. 2 huge games against the Lakers. They had just lost 3 in a row, the Clippers. Kawhi's got to hit the accelerator a little bit. Because I don't think it's that he doesn't have the 6th gear anymore. I think he just hasn't gone to it very much. Right, there's a big difference there. I'm not seeing a guy who can't do it, who's moving dramatically differently than last year when he had his best offensive regular season, you could say. Efficiency-wise, it was for sure. I'm seeing somebody who hasn't really pushed himself yet. Maybe the team hasn't pushed him either, and he just hasn't stepped on the gas. He hasn't been that aggressive. He hasn't clicked in to 6th gear, but I think it's still there. Again, there's a difference between he hasn't gone to it yet and he doesn't have it. I've seen enough glimpses there. I've seen it in spurts. And if there was no structural damage, granted, he still had a knee surgery. They called it a cleanup, or it's been called a cleanup by people, whatever that means. I don't see how he could be drastically different from last season if there's no structural damage. In fact, the first couple games back, he was moving really well. People were freaking out. His minutes were way down. He was at 20. So maybe he could exert himself a little bit more in the time he was out there on the court because he knew he didn't have to pace himself with only 20 minutes. And then by the time the San Antonio game happened, when he had those 27 points with ease, I was convinced right then he can get back to last year's version of himself. And if he can, then we're in business. Then the Clippers have a shot against anyone in the West. But we have to see it first. And we got to see it for like 10 games at least before the playoffs start. And he's likely only playing, health permitting, 19. With the back-to-backs they still have, you know he'll be missing one of those. They only got 24 games left. I think there could be more of a sense of urgency coming up against the Lakers. Now, I also had this from Carlo Jimenez pregame last night I wanted to play for you guys. I've been talking about when Kawhi hit the gas last season, when he hit the NOS. And it happened after a game where he shot it miserably against Denver, but he got a ton of shots up in that brutal loss where they somehow got beat by a Denver team that just had Reggie Jackson and DeAndre Jordan out there. After that, they're in Sacramento. He dunks on JaVale McGee. He was making much quicker decisions. He was moving quicker. Maybe because the game was slowing down for him. He seemed to be a step ahead again. And that was the start of the 30-game stretch where he set the all-time efficiency record, shooting 57, 51, 92 shooting splits. That was it. And it happened after a really bad shooting performance. It all just came together right then. And the Clippers rolled, and that was a big part of why they went 26-5 over 31 games. So Carlo took it a little bit further with doing some more research on that point of the season last season when Kawhi really started to assert himself, be more aggressive out there, lead them, be the clear-cut number one option every night. Listen to this.
Team, they get Kawhi Leonard back. I hope that can cure a lot of what ails them, because he did have 25 in both of his last 2 games with the squad.
Yeah, he's been playing well before that left foot injury, Adam, shooting 44% from the field, 43% from the three-point line. One thing that really interested me, Adam, that I went and looked at is you talked about, and you have talked about, that game against Denver, right? And Kawhi Leonard, that being the turning point for Kawhi Leonard. So I looked at the minutes. How many minutes had Kawhi played after that game? He played 540 minutes after that game. So that's where he turned the corner. He's at 422. So you're looking at 120 minutes left for Kawhi to get to full strength. I mean, I don't know. This is an exact science. I'm just trying to figure out some sort of way to look at this ramp-up process, and I feel like maybe that could be one way to look at it so far as of now for the Clippers. So you think about Kawhi getting his legs underneath him. Glad to see him back off the injury report, ready to go for this game. He'll be
So that was good research by Carlo. He's saying he's about 120 minutes away from that point last season when all of a sudden he turned into the most efficient, lethal offensive version of himself. So what could that be? 4 games? He's 4 games away? I don't think they have time for that. Carlo mentioned how it's not a perfect science. It doesn't mean he's technically 4 games away, or that those are the minutes they're looking at before they say, okay, Kawhi, go. Sick him. Before he's fully unleashed. But I thought that was really smart from Carlo there in just comparing things. But I will say it didn't take him this long, 17 games, to get going coming off the ACL in the 22-23 season. Now, it was different. He had the ankle injury too early in the season. He had the knee stiffness. So he was kind of in and out. You know, he was on that minutes restriction to start the season, obviously, coming off the bench against the Lakers and Phoenix. And then he had the knee stiffness. He's out for 3 weeks. Then he comes back, turns the ankle. But let me count the games here. Actually, it was about 17 games in when he turned the corner. It's almost exactly 17 games. Let me count this again. Now I'm freaking out. Hold on. Hold on, guys. 17. Wow. It was exactly 17 games. So his 17th game that season during the 22-23 year was at Denver, where the Clippers, I think, got smoked. They did, 122-91. He had 6 points. I don't even know if he played in the second half. From that point on, as he had before that, a 31-point game, a 25, a 26, a 24 within the first 17 games. But there were also a lot of 13-point games, 14-point games, 16, stuff like we saw last night with just 17 points. But after that Denver game, that was game 17, Kawhi hit the NOS. 29, 33, 24, 30 points, 27 points, 36, 30, 25, 27, 32, 33. And he averaged 28 points per game that month of January. Well, now I'm kind of getting excited. It was exactly 17 games in then. Let's see how many games in it was last year before that Kings game with a dunk on JaVale McGee where Kawhi took off from there. Sorry, guys, I'm doing this in real time, but this is real important. Wow. It was 16 games. And then the game hit against Sacramento. That was game 17 for him. And that's when he took off. Am I counting this right? Is this real life? 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Yes, it was 16. I think we're right there then, guys. We're about to find out if Kawhi is still him. It's right at that point, game-wise, the last two seasons where Kawhi turned on the gas. That's pretty crazy. I didn't think it would be that, on the button, like right there. It was 17 games exactly coming off the ACL when then he flipped a switch. It was 16 games before he flipped a switch last year. Is it happening right now against the Lakers this weekend? They need him. It's time. The only way you can peak with this squad and reach your maximum ceiling is if Kawhi is the number one option and you're playing through him more. He's the most talented player. He's the best player. He's the two-time champ, two-time finals MVP. This is it. This is your superstar. This is the guy you're counting on to lead you. I just can't believe the number of games. Like, are we entering scary hours? Is this it? There were other times just a few weeks ago when the Clippers had another 3-game losing streak where he said post-game something to the effect of he was questioning where he fits in as well. He said, basically, I'm trying to figure that out myself right now in the offense. And I thought it was a little bit alarming and maybe telling of where things were at. But the three-point shooting looks good. He's at 47% from three the last 9 games. That should be some indication that his legs are there. And if you look at the last 2 seasons, we're hitting right at that number of 16 or 17 games into the season where then Kawhi raises his game. And the efficiency comes. And the production comes where he's averaging 25 plus a night. This could be it. It has to be it. For this team to be a contender, this is the time. Wouldn't it be great to see him flip that switch and be vintage Kawhi again against the Lakers this weekend? I'm much more encouraged after looking at the game log and counting those games and finding out exactly at what point Kawhi raised his level of play. This is really interesting to me. I'm getting too excited now. Or maybe just the appropriate amount. If it happens against the Lakers this weekend, like it needs to, then we're in great shape. Because I don't know if you guys heard, this wasn't NBA Sentinel, who is back online on X, but the Lakers got Luka Doncic. And even before that, they were playing much better basketball. Speaking of the Lake Show, right on time. Johnny on the spot, but we'll call him Harrison Faigen from SB Nation, is joining us now to break down this Clippers-Lakers matchup tomorrow night and Sunday. Harrison, thanks for joining me here on Clippers Talk. How are you?
I'm doing well. Apologies for my camera being out of whack for some reason, but happy to be here.
Blinded by the light. It's just, it's the morning dew. It's the light coming through your window. That's all it is right now. A cat in the background.
It's the, it's the glory of being a Lakers fan right now, and it's just the light that Luka has brought to Los Angeles. It's giving me an angelic glow currently.
I get that. It's Last Dragon, Bruce Leroy, like aura going on with you right now. Hey, Lakers living a charmed life, as always, in most unbelievable fashion most recently. Let's talk about that to start things off here, Harrison. I appreciate you joining me here on Clippers Talk. But where were you and how many holy shits did you drop when you saw the news that the Lakers got Luka?
A lot of holy shits. I was at home. I had just watched the Lakers beat the Knicks, like the shorthanded Lakers beat the Knicks. I was already sort of like, a little juiced up because it's like, oh, like that was a fun win, underhanded team, like without AD going to Madison Square Garden. LeBron has a great game, like
Max Christie was great.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that was a fun win, hey, maybe they're building towards something. Like this is, and little did I know what they were building towards. And it was trading, Max and Anthony Davis and one first-round pick for Luka Doncic. And, I think my reaction was probably the same as everyone's initially. I'm sure you and most of your listeners were sort of like, oh, wow, that's crazy. Shams got hacked, It's like, well, I respect them for not just trying to like shill a crypto or, do whatever other crazy stuff hackers normally do, like sell you a PS5, that sort of thing. It's like, that was at least like an interesting way to take it, but he could have come up with like a realistic trade. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I am not hacked. And it's like, okay, that's exactly what someone who is hacked would say. And so it probably took me like half an hour to really like finally accept. It was like multiple news outlets were posting and confirming that, yes, this was real and it was something that had actually happened, and it was going to take us a while to understand why and how and like it all, like the reasons, but just crazy night.
How do you interpret the why part of it? I've kind of oversimplified it to just Nico Harrison grew to hate Luka, and he had an infatuation with Anthony Davis, and it's not an NBA conspiracy because why would he care about helping the league like that if he's going to look like an idiot in the end? Is it really worth it? Like, how do you see this now a couple of weeks in? Has the story made more sense to you?
So, yeah, I think the story is probably more complicated than the version that we've gotten, where it's like Nico Harrison is sole operator and he just believed in Anthony Davis this much and, just like really grew to hate. Like, I think all of that is like mostly true, but I think except the part that's not totally believable to me is like, this guy is a fat loser who, is going to get hurt and can never lead us anywhere, after you're coming off of a finals run, is like, that's like a former player that's like legendary player turned head coach take. That's not like a Nike executive pencil pusher take, And so like to watch Luka and sit there and be like, yeah, but this guy could be better. Like that's something, like a legend says, not, again, like maybe I believe that Nico Harrison was not the biggest fan of him or his work ethic or, and all of those things. But I think it's probably, to me, this screams Jason Kidd involvement, in some form or fashion. And, I would be fairly surprised if we don't ultimately find out that he was involved in some way.
You think he's getting the old Kobe label of uncoachable, that type of thing going on right now, and JJ Redick doesn't know what he's in for, even though he played next to him?
I'm sure that's what the Mavs think. Like, they're just like,
Yeah.
hey, look, I'm sure. I mean, they seem to leak that they, some bad habit that they hated after every single time they lose. So I'm curious to see if they keep that up after every single loss this year. If it's like, the next game they lose, they're like, yeah, Luka, he never parked in his assigned spot at the practice facility. It was just like, it was really disrespectful. There are other people that have to park here, and he just was sort of throwing it out of whack for everyone. They're just gonna like say some like minor bad habit that he had, while averaging 35 and 11 or whatever, that made them decide that they had to trade him.
Yeah, I would say that stuff should override any downsides to Luka Doncic, maybe being difficult to coach, or maybe not having the best eating habits, or maybe just enjoying life like a lot of the
Yeah.
European guys do, because they're more balanced in some ways, and their entire identity might not just be wrapped up in what is a job. And I totally can understand that part of it.
And I will
How do you
say too, even if they're right about a lot of the bad habits that he which like I believe that he does have some maybe unideal habits for a professional athlete, like he's 25. And how many guys have we seen figure it out as they get into like their late 20s and sort of like have to, it's like, oh yeah, I can't eat McDonald's before every game, or like, it's like Kobe Bryant, the paragon of work ethic that Nico Harrison is citing, is like, the being up close to him is the reason that he knew Luka couldn't make it, basically. Is like, would freely admit that early in his career he was having like McDonald's and pizza before games, and like eventually as he got older he learned he had to eat a little better before like doing this stuff. And again, like Kobe never got to the shape that Luka's in. I understand that there are differences there, but it's like lots of guys have figured out, Jokic included, to reference another European guy, where it's like he's like, hey, I'm going to stop drinking 2 liters of Mountain Dew a day, and then all of a sudden it's like, wow, he leads his team to the title. It's like these things can be changed. This is not like some, he's going to do this forever necessarily.
I mean, I think Kobe said before his 81-point game, he ate a pepperoni
Yeah.
pizza. Like, so I don't know what the brand was, because that would have been pretty good endorsement that he could have probably nabbed there. Eat a pizza. In fact, forget drink Sprite and you can dunk like
Yeah.
Grant Hill, or you
If you
can't.
eat
Just
an
eat the pizza
entire
that Kobe
pepperoni
ate.
pizza from Shakey's, you will score 81 points in your next basketball game.
If you compare everyone to Kobe, Mike, and LeBron, you're probably going to be disappointed and have very unrealistic expectations of how a guy should perform, at least off the
Yeah.
court, with his work habits as a professional. It's
And again,
just,
it's like the
it's crazy.
mythologizing is sort of wild, because it's like even MJ, it's like, did Nico watch The Last Dance and see what MJ was doing the night before games? It's like, again, I'm not saying that, MJ, like obviously MJ kept himself in better shape than Luka has. That's a real thing that Luka has to own. He's a professional athlete. Like it's something it's an area he's going to have to get better. But like lots of guys have had, active nightlives and, busy, times off the court, and still manage to perform at a high level or learn from it and get better habits as their careers go on.
Some guys can handle it, some guys can't. I remember hearing stories about what ruined Billy Owens was being at Golden State with Latrell Sprewell, and him burning the candle on both ends, and Billy couldn't keep up, and he developed bad habits that way. But some guys obviously can manage. So how do you think LeBron reacted when he first heard? Is this like, well, he had to act hurt because AD is his guy? He also secretly is like, this is it. This is what can extend my career to winning more championships now. I have the guy that I can actually pass the torch to and feel
Yeah,
good
it's
about.
like, what is on some level, like my whole thing with all the LeBron reports since then have been like, what is he supposed to say? Like that was one of his best friends. Like even if he was over the moon excited and felt like this was the move, like you said, that like gets him another title before his career is over, he at the very least at the beginning has to be like, AD's my guy. I got to think about what this means for me. Just like in the interest of like not hurting his feelings and stuff like that. Like, but again, like this is someone who we saw, like, I don't know that anyone would argue that he was closer to Anthony Davis than he was to Dwayne Wade. And Dwayne Wade, someone who he shipped out, and he left once in free agency and then shipped out, in his return to Cleveland when it wasn't working out there. And so, I just don't know. Like, the idea that LeBron was not going to be able to get over this was always crazy to me, because he's someone who just cares about winning to some degree. And so it's like, even if he felt a little blindsided by the trade, which I actually sort of believe he was, like, I think that genuinely, like, him and Clutch and like that whole apparatus probably didn't know about this, because my guess is that we would have heard something about it through the media had it expanded beyond like a very, very inner circle of brain trusts within these two teams. But so I believe that he was surprised. I just don't believe that he was like super upset on anything more than like a human level of like, yeah, this sucks for like my guy that he just got traded in the middle of the night.
Harrison M. Faigen is where you can find him on X, helping us with this Lakers crazy shockwave that was sent throughout the NBA with them bringing in Luka Doncic and what's next this weekend against the Clippers as well. He's got the glow going on like Bruce Leroy in the background here. Harrison, I know you guys still have a game tonight against the Minnesota Timberwolves here, and it's kind of a big deal. And maybe some Clippers fans are actually rooting for you guys to win for once, because the Timberwolves are right behind the Clippers in the standings and trying to chase them down and get out of the play-in.
But okay, that makes sense.
That's the only possible reason, because outside of that, it's anyone but the Lakers. Please, God, please, God. This Lakers team, since they weren't able to bring in that center and the Mark Williams trade was nixed, do you believe this season their ceiling is a championship
So
still?
I didn't until I saw how they dismantled Denver and like how good that they can look when everything is sort of firing on all cylinders. I certainly don't think that they should be the title favorite by any means. Like, as you mentioned, even with the Mark Williams trade, I felt like the center position was going to be sort of a weak spot. I think they sort of dodged a bullet in rescinding that, regardless of however it went down, or if Rob Pelinka's ever going to be able to make another deal with the Hornets again, or all of that stuff. Like, I just, that seemed a little heavy for a guy with his resume and who has like been playing in like half the game since the trade was rescinded, basically, and looked pretty terrible against the Lakers without a center in their lineup, like a real one. At least they have Jackson Hayes, but like he's really just a lob threat. And so I think that they're pretty weak in the center position, and so that could come back to bite them, especially if there's teams that are really, really good at driving the ball to the basket, because I think the Lakers are going to struggle to protect the rim in those situations with teams that are really physical there. But I do think that there's a world where if they catch the right matchups, this offense is just going to be so potent where if Austin Reeves is your third guy on the weak side getting kick out passes and going against like a 3-on-1, basically, that's just an unstoppable attack. If you watch them, there were times against the Mavericks where like I was laughing at how open LeBron was when they were trying to blitz Luka and take the ball out of his hands. It's like, that's LeBron right there is his bailout, right? Like, and so this is just going to be a really, really difficult offense to stop, especially as they get more chemistry playing against each other. So I do think that they could come out of the West. I do think that they could win the title, but I think that I would still have the Celtics over them. I would still right now have the Thunder over them. And at the very least, those two teams.
The one thing I noticed in that game against Denver is just how active they were defensively with rotations and playing small but flustering Jokic and having three guys there, and they'd wait for him to put the ball on the floor to then double and triple team him. It was pretty brilliant. But then afterwards, you hear how much they put into that game, and I'm like, wait a second.
JJ said that he didn't.
I don't know if. Yes, he went on. He went dark room in the film room and just stayed there, cracked out to study all the film he could on the Denver Nuggets. It was kind of like Leonardo DiCaprio on the beach when he lost his mind. It was like seeing video games running around. But that was such a high level of defense and focus. I just wonder, can they do that through an entire playoff run? Like, can they exert that much energy if they have to go small, because you get all the benefits offensively from doing that, but defensively you got to scramble a ton and just exert yourself?
Do you think that is
So
sustainable?
in the playoffs, I would assume they're going to have some letdown games needing that much effort and that much execution to, like, whether or not the effort lets down, there are just going to be games where they just don't have it and they're not able to sort of summon that level of franticness on their rotations, and they're just like a little slow, or they're looking a little creaky, or they're a little tired because, hey, you played like the first round. Sometimes you're playing, like a couple days not in a row, but like close together and it's compacted. There are times like that. But then once you get to the conference finals, you're having a day, 2 days of rest in between every game. And I do think that there is like a world where they can sum it up in the playoffs. It's actually the regular season where I have a harder time seeing them keeping this up, which is why I don't really buy the whole, like, they're going to stay and finish with a top 4 seed or anything like that. I think at some point this is going to let down and they are not going to play this hard over the entirety of the rest of the regular season. And we've already seen it. Like, they've had letdown game against the Hornets. They almost lost to the Blazers. That was without Luka. There are going to be games where they aren't that locked in and they're going to give up a ton of points to a team that they shouldn't. And, I do think they're going to lose some games that way. But I think in the playoffs, that's when we see teams summon effort like this. So I do believe that it's somewhat sustainable, but I still think that there are weak points in that defensive approach.
And they might slow down around that 6-8 they have coming up here in March at one point, with 2 games against Denver, 2 games against the Bucks. It's just brutal. That was the rescheduling after the wildfires here in Southern California. How good has Austin Reeves been the last 2 months? Because I've heard some wild stuff out there. Like, is he what James Harden was starting to look like on OKC, where he was the 3rd and 4th option at times? If this guy had his own team, like, he could turn into something even more special. How good
so
has he been?
I'm skeptical of that comp just because the James Harden thing is such an unprecedented outlier where, like, we've just never seen a guy go from that role to, being like promising young 6-man, whatever, to being like MVP candidate in a couple years. And like, that just seems unlikely for him to take that kind of leap. But I do think that he's someone that is really, really good. And I think way overqualified for the role that the Lakers have him in. And so, I don't know, I don't know how good a team led by Austin Reeves would be, but for the Lakers, that doesn't matter. They don't need him to lead the team. He's their 3rd member of the big 3 that's making $12 million. That's going to allow them to sort of fill in financially around this team, over the next year and try and take advantage and really chase a title. So I think he's really, really good. I saw my friend and co-host Anthony Irwin compared him to Manu Ginobili on the Spurs yesterday, which is like another sort of crazy like comp to put an undrafted guy in, but it's like not that crazy given how he's played. Like, I don't think he's Manu, but he is someone who can have that sort of impact in the more limited role because of, just how many teams have a 3rd defender that is capable of sort of locking down Austin Reeves. And then the Lakers sort of face you with this problem of you run out of guys, where against the Mavs, it wasn't Austin, Luka, or LeBron bringing it home down the stretch, or at least not in the second half. It was Rui, because, most teams don't have a 4th guy that can guard Rui Hachimura. I know Clippers fans probably are like, why is this guy talking about Rui? But he is, again, like way overqualified to be a 4th option on a team's offense. And, just really big physical guy that can sort of, make hay around the rim. And I just think that, Austin's really, really good. And I don't know how good a team led by him would be, but I hope the Lakers never have to find out. And they just keep, trading for stars that he is allowed to play around and orbit around.
What's the latest when it comes to minutes with Luka Doncic and restrictions with him and LeBron James right now, who's also, obviously didn't play the All-Star game, came back. We weren't sure how much he would play. Like, is there a chance that one of them doesn't play Friday night against the Clippers because of the second night of a back-to-back?
I think there's a chance. JJ has said that he said when Luka sat out the last back-to-back that was sort of the end of his official restrictions around that. But they've also been very cagey about like who's on a minute restriction and who is not this year. Like Dorian Finney-Smith, for the first like 2 or 3 weeks he was with the Lakers, people were like, why isn't JJ playing this guy more? He's really good. And then it's like 3 weeks later, they're like, oh yeah, he was on a minutes restriction. He had like a hip thing he was dealing with that we just didn't tell anyone about, and we're just playing him like 15 minutes a game, and so I would not be surprised if one or both of them sat out of that game, just because, it's possible they pick up a nick or knack tonight and the team wants to be careful with them. But I think all things being equal, my guess would be that they both play in both games, because my conspiracy tinfoil hat theory on LeBron playing in the second night of the back-to-back against the Blazers when he was, I think, questionable all day. I don't think he was doubtful, but he was questionable. Was, hey, I'm 40, Luka, and I'm going out here and I'm going to play in the second night of this back-to-back. So I want to see you sort of bringing that level of fire. And I think, that message was potentially received based on the way that we saw Luka play in his next game.
What's your ideal small ball lineup with them? What is the death lineup where you always impose your will and you make other teams have to adjust to you
I
if
think
you're
the
the
best
Lakers?
lineup this team can put on the floor, small ball wise or otherwise, is it's Rui at the 5, Dorian Finney-Smith at the 4, and then Luka, LeBron, and Austin Reeves. I think that has been, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. My guess would be that has been early on their best 5-man unit, just based on those guys. But I think that Dorian has a real, plays off of Luka really well. Obviously, they have a ton of chemistry going back to their time in Dallas together, and is like an A+ sort of dirty work guy that allows sort of Rui to play Rui's defensive instincts at the 5 are getting a little better. I'm not going to claim that he's going to clamp down other teams' 5s, but their rotations are getting better. Those guys are active. That's a really big lineup outside of the center position. That's a lot of size, especially around the perimeter. And so I do, and as well as a ton of scoring, obviously, and spacing. So I think that's probably their best lineup.
Do you think they'll try to run that when the Clippers have Ivica Zubac out there, or are they going to match Jackson
I mean,
Hayes
they ran it
minutes with
against
him?
Jokic. I can't imagine that they're not going to try it against Zoo. I mean, all due respect to my guy, I still can't believe that the Lakers, gave him up for a sandwich. But, I would imagine they will try it. But I do wonder, Zoo is someone who is a little bit more physical on the boards than Jokic even is, and especially in chasing offensive rebounds, because at least when I've watched it, the Clippers offense is not necessarily being run through him to the degree that it is through Jokic. And so he's a lot more active on the glass in my experience. And that's something an area where he has killed the Lakers the last couple of years, given their weakness at the center position. And I would expect him to be active again on the offensive glass tomorrow. And we'll see if the Lakers can score enough to sort of, make that, play him off the floor.
Do you have any long-term questions about Luka Doncic aside from, some of the bad habits we mentioned earlier? If just it can work to play that heliocentric basketball at the highest level, because last season we saw what happened against the Boston Celtics in the NBA Finals. Can you play that brand and still win in that way in today's NBA? LeBron was able to do it, with next to Kyrie Irving, but is that still doable in the modern NBA to build around one guy like we'll see coming up once LeBron eventually retires, maybe in 10 years, but who knows?
He's going to play till he's
Is that
actually going to
something that
outplay
Luka
Luka. He's
Doncic
going to last longer. He's going to play till he's 65. He's going to play with Bronny's son on the Lakers. I think that I have the same questions that you do about whether or not that heliocentric style can win at the highest level, dependent on how good your second option is off of that. I think the problem that the Mavs ran into, and the problem that the Harden Rockets ran into, and the beyond health and just bad luck on their 3-point shooting and stuff like that, and the problem that a lot of these heliocentric teams have run into is how good is that second guy, and is it good enough to really, really punish you for how much attention you're going to be sending at that first guy? Because I mean, the problem in the finals last year for the Mavs was not Luka, it was Kyrie, which is sort of the crazy thing about all the takes that have come out from the Mavs since then. It's were you watching the finals? Kyrie was peeing down his leg the entire time, and Luka averaged 30 and 10 or something. Again, I get he wasn't the most efficient and he could have been better on defense, but I mean, so could Kyrie. And so I think that if your second option is LeBron James on that heliocentric style, I think that's pretty good. But if your second option is Austin Reeves and he's the second best player on the team, and the Lakers have a bunch of role guys and Luka and Austin Reeves, then I do think that there are definitely, there comes a level of the playoffs where that is not enough and you need more secondary attacking. And so it's going to depend on what sort of star they can pair next to him once LeBron does eventually sort of hang it up, or, even pair next to him and LeBron if LeBron decides to play next year on a discount and allows them to get some more help and stuff like that. So I think that next year is really the year where this team could be dangerous to me, provided LeBron can keep up something close to where he's at right now.
He is Harrison Faigen. Follow him again at Harrison M. Faigen on X, and of course with SB Nation. Harrison, I needed the insight with 2 games coming up in the Battle of Los Angeles this weekend, Friday and Sunday at Crypto, Clippers and Lakers. Thanks so much for doing
Happy
this
to
here
do
on
it
Clippers
anytime,
Talk.
Adam.
This guy is one of my favorites, if you guys didn't know. He's come on the F&A podcast multiple times. Harrison Faigen is one of those creative people that looks beyond just the numbers and brings it in and lays things out in a way that makes it a very interesting conversation. I wanted to pick his brain about Luka, about the Lakers, about the 2 biggest games of the season coming up this weekend for the Clippers. So it's cool to have him on. Give him a follow. Tell him you heard him here on Clippers Talk, which as always is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy is the easiest way to play fantasy sports, and it's available in over 30 states. All you got to do is pick higher or lower on your favorite player stats or your least favorite player stats, and you can win up to 100 times your money. Make picks, win money, and I got that free promo code for you guys. That'll give new users a free pick and up to $1,000 in bonus cash. The promo code is LAC, and you can find it in the referral link in the description down below in this very episode. Underdog Fantasy. Make picks, win money. All right. I think we got Clips and Dip coming up later tonight for you guys as well, maybe around 6. Stay tuned for that. For Harrison Faigen, thanks again for coming on. I'm Adam Osland. This has been another edition of Clippers Talk, 147 days straight. Is it starting to wear on me? Not at all. Love you guys in the chat. Appreciate you all. Hope you enjoyed this show. If you missed the Kawhi conversation to start things off before Harrison Faigen, hit that rewind button. Otherwise, we'll talk to you tomorrow. Clippers, Lakers, tip off at 7, pregame at 6, right back here on Clippers Talk.